Primetime Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. From good and simple tax to Gabbar Singh Tax, there is little doubt that GST has become a highly political issue. Most experts agree that teething problems persist. This is apparent in the regular changes that the GST Council keeps making, tinkering with rates, ease in filing returns, relief to exporters, etc. All of these are steps that have been taken. In fact, a slew of measures to ease GST further are anticipated in the next meet. But despite all of this, the pain recall of the goods and service tax persists. So is GST really a Gabbar Singh tax? To talk about this, we are joined this evening by A.K. Bhattacharya. He is Editorial Director of Business Standard. Praveen Khandelwal, National Secretary General of CAIT, is also joining us in this conversation. Thank you so much for speaking with us this evening. Mr. Khandelwal, I had spoken with you before the festive season when your organization had claimed that cash shortage plus GST is going to lead or is leading to a 40% reduction in sales. Now, 4 months after GST, do you think that there has been an improvement?
Well, precisely speaking, because of certain glitches in GST and non-smooth functioning of GST portal has placed the traders at the hands of harassment, because couple of hours people used to be there at the computer, try to log in, and still it is not successful. Every time there is an error. Beside all these things, the 28% tax slab is another area which is not liked by the consumer and the traders. So if we need to summarize the 4 months of GST, we can say that yes, we have moved ahead, but certainly there are many issues which needs to be tackled immediately.
You know, Mr. Bhattacharya, it's become interesting, and we started this debate from this point about why this is becoming an election pitch. And of course, in the state of Gujarat, where elections are due, it might resonate more, or opposition parties may hope it resonates more because there is a huge business community. But is it really irking people that much? My quest is to, sift the facts from the rhetoric. Is it really Gabbar Singh tax?
This is not a Gabbar Singh tax. But at the same time, nor is it a good and simple tax. So the truth lies somewhere in between, which is composed of the following, which is that structurally there are major flaws in the GST that was rolled out on July 1. And procedurally, there were many glitches that are now being sorted out over the last few weeks. So what we have now is a recognition on the part of the GST Council that those glitches have to be removed. For example, the composition scheme, the coverage being raised to 1 crore. In my view, why 1 crore? Why should it not go up to even 2 crore? Because you don't lose much revenue as a result. So because, up to units above 10 crore account for 80% of the revenues. So if you really want the GST to be smooth and make it really change the way people come into this system, then I think your start has to be smooth so that people have the buy-in. Now, what has happened is you have got too many slabs. Your rates are relatively higher than it ought to have been. And then you have got the procedural problems which have created embracing the problems for embracing the scheme. So while people are paying taxes, people are filing returns, but they would rather be happier if they were made to file the return, let us say once a quarter. For example, now the government GST Council has said that those who have a turnover of less than 1.5 crore rupees, they can file quarterly returns. There is no reason why every taxpayer cannot file the return quarterly. You can pay your taxes every month, but you can file your return once a quarter. So, these are procedural issues which are being sorted out So as a result of the structural problem and as a result of the procedural problems, you have a situation where this has not been a good and simple tax. This has been a tax which has caused a lot of problems for, especially for the small and medium enterprises.
Yes.
But the good news is the government and the GST Council are acutely conscious of this. As a matter of fact, the Revenue Secretary recently said that he is looking forward to some rejig in the GST structure.
No, in fact, there is hope that in the next meet, more items will be removed from the 28% slab. There is a push on including GST within MRP. Now, is all of that actually helping? Abhishek Rastogi joins us now in this conversation. He's partner at Khaitan & Co. Welcome to the debate, Abhishek. We're asking that is GST really Gabbar Singh tax or is it good and simple tax? Simply put, the question is that are people now getting used to it more and more?
Yeah, I think it is very pertinent question, and I think a lot of things which are happening are around the systems, are around a lot of writ petitions which are going to the court. So I think if we see the overall scenario today, we have to be optimistic also at the same time. I understand that, the small businesses, the medium-sized businesses are facing a lot of challenges, and I think there could be a couple of measures which the government wants to take, has taken and should take more aggressively, is to support the small businesses and the medium-sized businesses. But I think what is encouraging to learn or to see is that a lot of these writ petitions which are going to the courts, a lot of these issues which are going to the courts are being addressed by the government in a very, very pragmatic way. And when I say very pragmatic way, is that they also realize somewhere that some of these drafting problems have happened. So for instance, it all started with the writ being filed for the advocate services. So, but there is a notification now. The other matter which went to the court was in the case of Narendra Plastics. And I think the government within a week, the interim order was just granted, and much before the final hearing, the government took appropriate steps or measures to promote the export businesses. So I think there are a lot of other problems which have gone. So this week there's a writ petition which has been filed with respect to the transitional credits, the time limit of 12 months or with respect to the 6-month period for the supplies to happen. And there are other writ petitions which have gone to the courts in case of banking services, whether this IGST section 7.5 and imposition of this tax when the branch renders services to the head office, or for the matter the liaison office is rendering such services. So and the government is thinking with respect to those issues as well. So there are a plethora of issues which have gone. It could be like ocean freight, the taxability of ocean freight which has gone to the courts. So I think one aspect is with respect to the statutory provisions, or where the statutory provisions have gone beyond the constitution powers, or there is excessive delegation. So I think from that perspective, the government is able to take those decisions, or basically these more and more writs are coming to the courts.
Let's just put this in perspective. Sure, let's just put this in perspective. No matter how and when and in what form GST would be implemented, there would be teething troubles. There would be a process of getting used to a new system. One can look at it both ways, of whether the government is panicking or it's positive that they're responding to queries. But Mr. Khandelwal, I want to come to another part of this narrative, which is not often spoken about. And there are two parts to it. One is that it's the unorganized sector which is suffering more. There are certain sectors like, auto components or textiles which are suffering more. But also it is the problem of a lot of businessmen who are not used to having everything in the public eye, or in white, as they call it. Everything that can be scrutinized by tax authorities. And that is part of the pinch. Would you agree?
Traders never want to hide anything. But just imagine a situation where a trader want to issue the cash memo and consumer resists because the GST tax is 28% or 18%. What trader will do? Should the trader lose the customer, or should the trader issue the material? So my point is that we also want that recorded business should be there, but for that we need to have a simple and cohesive system without
I have a
having
poor line there with Mr. Khandelwal, and we'll try and fix that. But I just want to come to that point, Abhishek Rastogi, as well, because there's a lot of anecdotes of people now saying, "Acha, don't give us a bill, we don't want to pay the GST." And on the other hand of it, you do have businesses who are not used to keeping their books, and accounting for everything to that extent, and that's hurting as well. It's also a matter of habit forming.
See, I think there's a very mixed answer there, and I think the Indian businesses will now have to learn to pay taxes, and to a very large extent this question is again very important and pertinent, because a lot of these mid-sized businesses were not habitual of paying taxes, and we know for a fact that a lot of these transactions used to happen in cash without being accounted anywhere. So I think that has to certainly end. If we see that whether GST will help us in the long run or not, certainly I think the industry was supporting GST, all the stakeholders were supporting GST. So of course there will be some teething problems, but at the same time that the businesses and the customers will have to learn to bear that burden of taxes. And I think, yes, to a very large extent, it's right that people who are not habitual of paying taxes, suddenly when they realize that there is a tax element of 18% or 28% on certain luxury items or supplies, there is always, a thought that whether these transactions could be done without payment of taxes. But I think the mechanism which has now come, or the GST which will be implemented in the true sense, because there will be matching, there will be input output norms which will be seen, there will be cash balances, etc., which can be scrutinized. There is a much better way to track transactions now. So all that will help the government to improve the compliances in the long run, improve the tax payments in the long run, and of course gradually the rate has to come down. We have to now think what is the right time for reduction of these rates. But of course, as the compliance improves further, the rates will come down.
In fact, I'm just going to close with one comment from Mr. Bhattacharya, that usually paying a tax is not a very popular thing to do. People don't like paying taxes, but this government did manage to make GST into something that people were very excited about. Is there enough political potential in trying to pin this government down on GST as the opposition is currently trying?
I think the government's political this as an idea whose time has come, but in the implementation stage, the major mistake that was committed was by keeping so many rates, as many as 6 to 7 rates, and that too at a relatively higher level. Now, if you wanted to make it palatable and acceptable to a system which is not used to paying taxes, then probably the taxes could not have been 18% and 28% for a large number of items. And more importantly, by creating so many slabs, you are actually allowing lobbying and discretionary decision-making to be in play. So therefore, while the political intention was correct, I think the implementation stage, the government or the GST Council, to be precise, actually made a mistake by creating too many rates, too many exemptions, and in imposing conditions like invoice matching, which technologically the system, the GSTN, was not yet ready. Even today, the group of ministers meeting is actually examining whether the GSTN network can actually arrange for the kind of invoice matching which is becoming a must before anybody can claim input tax credit. So therefore, your ideas must match up with the action on the ground. Unfortunately, a good idea with good intentions, I think, has met with these avoidable glitches, avoidable problems because of technology problem and because of too many rates, and that too, some of the rates are at the higher band.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Good and simple tax or Gabbar Singh tax, it's somewhere in the middle, was the first comment that started this debate, and it's the perfect one actually to close the whole conversation because GST is something that the industry asked for a long time. It will take time to smoothen out, but at the end of the day, no one really likes paying taxes. One hopes that the passage gets easier over time. Now, the government is not willing to budge on its deadline to link numerous schemes and services to Aadhaar, even as a flood of cases pile up in the Supreme Court. The government is adamant that its deadline of February 6th, meanwhile, for linking Aadhaar with mobile will not be moved as of now. But remember, these pleas are pending and will be heard later on. But let's talk about the basic issue of linking your mobile connection with your Aadhaar number. And on Primetime Debate over the last few days, we've been talking to a number of people who have various views on this issue. Some of them, of course, feel that it's completely unfair. There could be a breach of data, there are privacy issues, etc. We thought that the best person to talk about the linkage would really be the TRAI Chairman RS Sharma, who's joining us now on Primetime Debate. Very good evening, sir, and thank you for speaking with us on Bloomberg Quint. Why the huge fears about linking mobile with Aadhaar? Yeah. And if there is so much of doubt in people's minds, why force them to link their mobile connections with Aadhaar?
No, let me tell you the whole history, because when you say people's mind, who are these people? Right, so you can't, they don't represent, let's say RS Sharma has some views, then RS Sharma's views are not the views of the people. So let's first separate that there are people who are opposed to this and there are people who are not opposed to it. So we should be very clear in that. Secondly, let me say that this whole thing started about, in January of 2016. We suggested to the Department of Telecom that one of the methods to give telecom connections should be Aadhaar electronic KYC. This essentially was meant to facilitate people to get the telecom connections. And this was a very robust way of authentication of the customers. And we recommended to the government that this should be one of the options people may exercise for getting a new telecom SIM. So that was the way we suggested. And there is a reason. One is that it will basically eliminate the need for having paper copies and paper documents. Another is there are a lot of forgeries which happen in these documents, in the sense that if I give my PAN card for getting a SIM in my name, this franchisee fellows, many times they make photocopies of that and they issue multiple SIMs in that. So it's not in my interest to give a photocopy of my PAN card or my election ID card or some other card which even my Aadhaar card for that matter, which actually can be photocopied, replicated, and SIMs can be got in my name, and then some crime happens, then there's a problem. So we suggested that there is a digital way, a more robust way for issuing the SIMs. It's also most environment friendly way. So the Department of Telecom issued the orders in August of 2016, where they prescribed that yes, Aadhaar electronic KYC will be one of the valid ways of getting a phone connection a phone SIM. So in January 2017, this particular issue of accepting Aadhaar as a proof of identity and address for getting a telecom SIM was accepted by the Department of Telecom in 2016 August. Then in January 2017, we gave a recommendation to the government that because there are huge number of papers stacked out, number one. Number two, which the telecom companies are maintaining, and number two, telecom companies are being fined by the Department of Telecom, their term sales, because many times these papers are not traceable. So there is some complaint which happens regarding the customer acquisition form, and those papers are not available, then obviously the telecom companies are fined. Thirdly, we also have a situation where TRAI receives hundreds of complaints from the police, hundreds of inquiries from the police, and I'm sure the Department of Telecom and the other departments must be doing that also, receiving that also, wherein a crime is committed, then a telephone is essentially caught, and as you know, a lot of investigation nowadays and it takes place through these telephone calls and their call detail records, etc. And then it turns out that the guy who was using the telephone is not the guy in whose name the SIM was issued. So this was basically a lot of fake SIMs and a lot of fraudulent SIMs are being issued to various people. And there is no robust mechanism for verification. So we said that because of this part, it is necessary, and we feel that it is necessary that these SIMs, some verification process must be adopted for the existing SIMs. And one of the verification process also could be the digitization of the existing paper things, which means that if there is a customer acquisition form which is fake, and if you say that, all right, who is the real person behind it, then in the re-verification process, if Aadhaar authentication, which is much more robust and much more reliable, is given, then what can be done is that first of all, the mobile gets verified, A. Secondly, now the telecom service providers can destroy that form, that customer acquisition form and the relevant papers, and this way the entire customer database gets digitized. And there are many other benefits which we had written in our letter of January 2017.
Mr. Sharma, if I may please put my question across to you, sir, if you will allow me. My question effectively is...
Sure, please do. Yeah.
My question effectively is that before it is clear whether Aadhaar is an invasion of my privacy or whether it should be mandatory or not, is it fair to impose Aadhaar as a mandatory verification document on any customer who does not want it, even if it is one single customer? That's part one. Part two of my question is, sir, you said that the Aadhaar identification was a much more reliable source of identification in your view. Is it fair to say that in light of certain events which have come up, for example, there is a village in which 800 people have the same date of birth in their Aadhaar number, while farm loan waivers are being disbursed in the state of Maharashtra, you have over 100 farmers or recipients of those farm loan waivers with the same Aadhaar number. How do we know that Aadhaar could not be subjected to the same misuse any other identity can? There is nothing really clear, is there, which sets it apart?
No. Let me answer two of your questions, right? The first question is that if anybody has any problems with the order of the Honorable Supreme Court, the real forum to approach is the Honorable Supreme Court and not Mr. RS Sharma, right? So one is, I'm not really the person who can answer the first question, because if there is any person who has got any problem with the order which stands as of now, then they should approach the Honorable Supreme Court, and I think people have approached the Honorable Supreme Court. So how can that order be, that operation of that order be put in abeyance without having any kind of order from the Supreme Court? to the contrary or otherwise. That's number one. Number two, on the process of, whether, somebody has got 100 people have got same date of birth, or whether it is more reliable or less reliable, I'm only saying that the authentication by Aadhaar is absolutely reliable. Whether this particular part that one person has 100 people have got same date of birth or not, that is something which I am not aware about, or I can't sort of contradict or support that particular hypothesis. That's your assertion, which probably I'm sure the authority which is now dealing with Aadhaar must be verifying. As far as I'm concerned, you are asking, I'm only concerned with this issue of linking or verification of the mobile with Aadhaar number, right?
So then let me.
So are you saying that the verification of mobile with Aadhaar number is a bogus verification?
No, I'm asking you one last question, which I think our viewers will be most interested in.
Sure.
What happens to those who do not link their mobile with Aadhaar?
Sure.
What happens to them in February next year? Do their connections get suspended as is being communicated by the mobile companies? What happens to them?
Again, the Department of Telecom has issued instructions in compliance of the Honorable Supreme Court's order, and that is something between, the Department of Telecom will have to give compliance report to the Honorable Supreme Court.
Thank you so much.
I'm not really the person who can say what happens to those who do not link.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. Bye.
On Bloomberg.